authors of this report, the leading author of this report. And also we are joined by Natalia Polivach, right, the victim who lived through occupation. And also, I do apologize, I don't know your name, Valentina Krolau, who is also the person affected by occupation. She's the victim of these events. So we will tell about this episode today, and we will show the outcomes of our investigation. As it seems to me, the outcomes of our investigation are just impressive, because it was very scrupulous work, and we never did anything like that before. And it was so attentive when we were going on working with the law enforcement authorities. Sometimes we wanted even to motivate them. Okay, then the first floor goes to Lydia. Lydia will be able to tell us about the chronology, the timeline of occupation. Maybe at some point you can have a break, and we'll give the floor to the witnesses, to the victims, and we'll come back to those who are responsible for that. So Lydia, please, if you don't mind, the floor goes to you. Good day. Could I ask you to show my presentation, please? I can tell you that the beginning of this work has taken place beginning with the village of Shybene. The beginning of this work started in 2024. In fact, we were working on the research of war crimes in Kyiv region. It was not Shybene village, it was Vyzhgorod, Dymyr, so different are the settlements, and we never even thought, we never knew about Shybene village, and it was never in the social media topics, so we never knew about it before. So accidentally, it took place in 2023 when our documenters went to the village of Fedorivka so that they could interview and communicate with the people who were in captivity and were released from captivity of Russia. So this is how gradually we managed to get to know that in the same village there are other residents who were affected by occupation. We got in touch with them, communicated with them, and it turned out that a man who used to live in this village was captured. He was not together with those people who we communicated before, and he had a different place of detainment. So it turned out that it was the forest, the woods, closer to Shybene village. Those were land pits. Let me find the slide. Here it is. Those are the pits. Out of those pits, this was the beginning of our research. First, he was the only witness who told us about horrendous facts, atrocities, that he was kept in the pits during the colder period of the year. It was the beginning of March. He told that first it was warmer when he was detained, but later, suddenly, there was frost, and he spent in these pits for about a week. He was forced to work, to dig trenches. Besides that, he was tortured with rats, which bit his hands. He was never allowed to get rid of those rats. They threatened him by death if he does anything with the rats. He was not fed. And later, he was released finally, but during his stay in the pits, he witnessed a murder of another civilian man. So we found that man, we identified him, found information about him. We found his relatives. It turned out to be a resident of Ivankiv village. We communicated with them, and during our work, we found out that and understood that we need to be more thorough and to be more attentive to Shybene village. So then we went to the village itself to communicate with the residents. First, we had an interesting story that after communicating by phone with the head of the village, she said to us, "Everything is okay, no one was detained. Only other people, other residents from different settlements were detained. Our village did not have any victims." Still, we went to the village, found witnesses, and in the end of the day, we identified 43 facts. At least 43 facts of the detainment of civilians in captivity, out of which we identified 12 people by their names. Unfortunately, not all of them could be identified by names, and some people died, so we cannot communicate with them. Let me come back to the beginning of my presentation. So here when we began our work, we understood that we need to do that more thoroughly, and this was the beginning of our research, so that we could identify all of the facts, everybody who was involved in that, to document everything, what took place in Shybene village and how and which war crimes were committed. Finally, we managed to conduct 38 interviews. We had interviewing. We created 8 field missions. Those were the pits in the forests, and besides that, we found out that the people were detained directly in the village. We found out that there were several detainment centers. We identified 5 detainment centers in Shybene village itself. So I'll come back to the key outcomes later. So I'd like to tell a bit how the occupation of Shybene took place. As an outcome of our researches and the research of the open sources, we identified that about 30,000 soldiers entered the area of Kyiv region from Belarus. Here at the map, I've shown an approximate direction of the soldiers, Russian soldiers' movement. As an outcome of this offensive actions, it turned out that the Ukrainian defense forces well, I do apologize. This is my first public speech, so I'm a bit overexcited. So, Kyiv city was not occupied in 3 days as they promised, so they stopped in Shybene village. We found out that in Shybene village there have been the military commandment in Shybene village. As for the timeline, when we interviewed the witnesses, we heard the following fact, that even before the full-scale invasion, about on the 22nd of February, the village saw some unidentified and unfamiliar people. The military, according to their camouflage uniform, they were moving using pickup vehicles without plates. They had tablets in their hands. That really surprised the residents. But no one was expecting for the offensive then, so this fact was not that driving attention to that. And after occupation and deoccupation, people analyzed those events and came to the conclusion that those were the intelligence groups of Russians. Later, in 2024, in the open sources, in YouTube, for instance, we could see the interview of Igor Savlikov. He is a professional military who recently was taking part in the private military company Redut. In his interviews, he told all the details about how the offensive against Kyiv region took place, and out of this confession of his, we could understand that maybe the residents of Shybene were not mistaken, because everything coincided. Salikov told that the military units of Russian troops came to Kyiv region, to the territory of Ukraine, before the beginning of the full-scale invasion, to the Chernobyl exclusion zone, and then they were seen in Shybene village on the 22nd. The full-scale invasion started on the 24th. If Putin announced about the beginning of the invasion at about 5 a.m., the residents of this region heard the explosions even at 4:30 a.m., so long before the official announcement. During this year, in February, in the Russian social media, we could see a video published, a video statement or the interview with the military who had the call sign Fort. Unfortunately, we could not identify him, but he also told that the offensive command was given a month before the full-scale invasion started. So on the 27th and 28th, the full-scale invasion was already ongoing. The Shybene village could see the convoys, 3 columns of military equipment. Yes, military equipment, yes, thank you. People say that it was so dense that it was just impossible to move along the roads. As one of the witnesses told us, that her granddaughter said, "Granny, we didn't even know that we have so wide roads." On the 28th, we should say, in the same village, they had the video shot of Channel 1 of Russian TV. This is the military correspondent, journalist Irina Kuksenkova. This report was shown on the 1st of March, but of course it was shot a day before that. In this report, she told that the occupation, well, they said liberation, of course, but it took place quickly, very nicely, without any victims. But during this day, there was the shelling of this village, and a 10-year-old girl was killed by this shelling, and also the man was targeted who wanted to attack the convoy. Later, 3 more persons were killed. Altogether, as we could find out, there were 5 civilians of Shybene residents killed who became victims of this invasion. After Russians occupied Shybene village, they were in several institutions, like the village council, and altogether mostly they lived in the school, in the forestry institution. Why that? Well, on this map you can see that those are 3 institutions which are located not far from each other, at Kooperativna Street. They are really close to each other, so the Russians were staying there and put their equipment there. So they organized the military warehouse there. After that, they actively decided to organize propaganda that Russians are the defenders and They were trying to organize peaceful life. That's what they tried to show. They were shooting the report for the social media. A couple of reports, how they distribute humanitarian aid, how they go and provide medical care for the residents. You can see those soldiers on the slide. On the 4th of March, the video was published how they conduct the elections of the head of the village, so-called elections. Shybene village did not have starosta. The starosta was fired before the full-scale invasion, and when the Russian military came to the village, they were searching for some management in the village. It turned out that they were not there, so they were offering to organize elections. The candidates were the persons who used to be the head of the village before, as if residents themselves offered such a candidate, and on the slide you can see the voting process, as if everyone is taking part. Is it time? Well, let us look into the chronology of the events. They elected the head of the village. This was the second case in Kyiv region when the occupational authorities were trying to impose their own representative, the head of the village. Lydia, could you go on, please? Yes. So, in fact, we are moving to the detainment of several civilians during the stay of the Russians in the village. The first case was about the pits. If we look at the time frame, it was the beginning of March. Lydia, could you name which detainment centers existed and move to the forestry? About the pits, which were not far from the forestry. Yes, we found out that those were, first of all, pits, land pits, earth pits in the forest. Then there was the forestry institution and a school, a basement of the school. In the forestry, we found out that they had at least 16 people detained. As for the school, about 7 people were detained, and in the obstetrician point, there were 3 people who were detained in the isolated way. You can see how it looked before the full-scale invasion and how it looks now. Here we have the picture where there is a toilet behind the building. Seems that it's not a nice picture, but still this toilet played a very significant role in our research, because thanks to that we identified where exactly it took place. Looking at the statement of the people who were taken to the toilet, first of all, they could see each other, identified each other, got acquainted. I'm already spoiling what you would like to tell, right? Because those were 2 women who were taken to the toilet, but they saw each other. And later we went to this village with Natalia, and we identified that it was the medical and midwifery station. Because when we talked to Valentina, we were in doubts. We could assume that it was a school, looking at the circumstances. But as for Natalia, we could identify this place, this location for sure. Lydia, do I understand correctly that when you found out that the people from Shybene village and neighboring settlements were detained in the pits, and then you researched how the persons from Shybene were detained, why we didn't know that much about this settlement? Because the people from the settlements were not taken to Russian Federation, as it was done with the majority of settlements of occupied Kyiv region. That's why the information was really scarce. And secondly, let us then move, as far as I understand, to the research. Let us tell about the occupation of Shybene and also about the obstetric and midwifery station. Well, in fact, I already told everything. Let us now move to our victims, if I may. So, okay, thank you. Let us start with Valentina then. If I may, could you please tell us how the beginning of occupation looked for you and how you found yourself detained, and why you, the local resident, couldn't even understand where it was specifically. Let me tell you, during the occupation, we were with my husband at home, and then we went to my mom's. On the 21st of March, my husband, as we were out of food, he went home, and then he was instantly taken by Russian soldiers in the yard. There was an ambush, so he was detained. I identified him on the picture. That was him sitting there. I identified him on the picture. So when he was taken on the 21st of March, the people who were transporting him across the river, when they were coming back to the village home, they could see that there were lots of soldiers of Russian Federation close to our house, and they loaded everything onto the truck from my house. Coming to the village, they did not tell me a thing. I was waiting for my husband for a long time, and then I came to them and asked them where my husband was. I was told that I cannot get there, and that he was not there. He was taken away. So I understood that I will be also sought for. They will search for me, because my husband used to work in our district as a military commissariat officer. So together with my daughter-in-law, Maria, we hid in the forests. We went to spend a night in the woods. Early in the morning, on the 22nd of March, we did not have our watches, but still at about 5 or 6 a.m., the soldiers came to the village in 3 trucks. So they did not ask about anything. They went straight to my mom's house. As I knew everything in the village, we ran through the forest, and then we hid in the grain silo. With my daughter-in-law, we hid in the grain silo and were watching what was taking place in my mom's yard. We were staying there for a long time, and when it was already dark, we left the grain silo and went to my mom's house. When we went there, it was really hard to see all of that. Everything was upside down. They organized a huge search. My mom said, "Please flee, because I don't care anymore. I am 80 years old." So they told her, "If this officer's bitch does not come home in the morning, we will burn everything." My sister is living not far from my mom with 7 more people. So I didn't have anything left to do. I sent my daughter-in-law to my sister's house, and I stayed and waited for them. At about 5:45 in the morning, they were already in the house, rushed through the door, and began to beat me, pulled my hair, and interrogated me where I stayed yesterday. I used to say that I was searching for my husband closer to the river, thought that someone would help me cross the river, but nobody believed me. They instantly took my papers, wanted to claim my documents. I don't even remember which paper I gave them. They began to beat me and said, "Give us your certificate of the person with disability." They knew everything about that. They beat me with their legs against my kidneys, pulled my hair, beat me against the wall. I threw my documents with the keys. They tied my hands behind my back with the duct tape and brought me to the street. And I could see that my daughter-in-law was taken from my sister's house as well. When I looked at her, I began crying. I said, "Please don't take her, she's not ours. They just married with my son in September, and the occupation took place in February." I said that she was a stranger. She didn't know anything. I understood that as soon as she gets to their place, they will never let her survive. They interrogated her as well, and then they took me with my vehicle. They put my car from my mother's house, and they had 3 cars. As I was standing and watching them, I could calculate 12 people. All of them were armed. Each of them had a walkie-talkie. They were talking to each other. And then I was taken to the vehicle, a blue one. I do remember it very well. They put me into this car, and we began our way. We were going for a long time to some village. Then they took me to the bus stop, left the vehicle, and for about 20 or 30 minutes they were not there. Then we went on and went to the Kyiv road, the one which takes us from Belarus to Kyiv city. The cars turned to Ivankov, where I used to live, and the car with me turned to Kyiv city. We were going along the road, then they stopped and told me, "Get out." I left, so they blindfolded me with the duct tape and then threw me, as far as I understood, to the back place where they sat there under their legs. So they were bringing me, I didn't even know where to. When we finally reached the final destination, they took me and said, there are stairs here, so you should get to the building. I was blindfolded. They tied my hands, and then they took me to some room and began the search. A woman searched me. She was low. She was lower than I was. I heard that she was not at the same height as I was. She was searching for my tattoos. She was asking where my cell phone was. I buried it because my son was the student in Kyiv. So I took the pictures of him giving the oath at the university. So I buried my cell phone. I didn't want to show them about my son. Well, she told me that it was so bad that I got rid of the phone. Then they took me to another room, and I was waiting for somebody for a very long time. Then they took off the duct tape from my eyes, and I could see a man in the military uniform, and I could see only his eyes and a beard. That's it. 2 people came to the room where I stayed, and they told me, "Valentina Petrovna, we know everything about you. You can tell us the truth." I told them, "What do you know about me? I'm a simple person." "We know everything about you. We know that your husband was working and where you were working. We know everything about your son. We know everything about you, even better than you know anything about yourself. Tell us everything since the 24th of February till today. Tell us about your whole life." When I said something wrong, as they said, I made stops in my speech. There was such a person there. When I looked at him, I couldn't identify him. Maybe he was from Buryatia, Russian part. If I said something wrong or made breaks, he came up to me and pulled my hair and beat me with against my head over the table. So I stayed at this room after the interrogation. They came any time after that, during the day or night. As I used to work as a medic, they had the shift every hour. So I even heard the next day, "What shall we do with that old woman?" I heard it behind the door. Another guy answered, "We need to look after her. She should stay alive." she shouldn't die. So they came up to me every day. They asked about my husband. They showed some pictures to me. They asked where my sons were. So then I lost consciousness. I fainted. They beat me against the stomach, my kidneys, pulled my hair. I had high fever and even bleeding. I was really silent sitting during the night. They gave me some cans with food. When I took the can with the food, they were not angry. But as soon as I said that I don't want to take a can, they instantly came up to me and beat me. So I was taking those cans and sitting there silently. After these beatings and interrogations, I was just thinking that I would never survive. I wanted to commit something, to commit suicide, because I couldn't stay there. They did not give me food. They took me to the toilet once a day. In the toilet, it was the only place where I could stay. So I could just... then they took me out of the toilet and back to the room. They brought me water in the bottle. As I'm a medic, I could see that that water was not clean. It had some powder in it. So maybe I had to pour it out. So there was the can with the holes. So I poured this water there, and they changed the water later. During the third day, they came up to me, began the interrogation again, so I fainted. They put me on the chair, and nobody came during the fourth day. I thought that they will shoot me. Nobody came, and then, during the lunch, it was Sunday, they came up to me, but I couldn't see those torturers. They came up and looked at me, that I was on my own. They did not say a word to me. They tied my hands with the duct tape, blindfolded me, and took me. I could hear the vehicle, so they took me to that vehicle. I understood that it was a low vehicle, and maybe it was an ambulance or something like that. And they were taking me somewhere for a long time. I forgot to say that in the evening when I fainted, the doctor came up to me and they said, "This is the doctor." He said that he was Sergei Ivanovich, and there was no light, there was no heating, nothing was there. I was sitting there, and as I was hiding in the forest before, all of my clothes was wet. So I was sitting in the wet clothes. So they were taking me for a very long time somewhere. Then the vehicle stopped, and they began to take me out of this vehicle by my hands. I told them, "Will you shoot me?" And they said, "No, we already found out what we wanted." So they just threw me to the sideways. And then I understood that I am at the sideways when I could take duct tape on my own. This was the road which is coming from Belarus. I was lying down, I had herpes and bleeding and high fever. So I went to the nearest settlement and entered the first yard. It was closed there, so I went to the another one, so I could find the open doors in the third one. When the people saw me, they were really frightened. They gave me water. I was really thirsty. They gave me water, and they brought me to my mother's place. I was sleeping for 24 hours. I couldn't have any strength. My mother said, "Valentina, do you see that your hands are wounded and dirty? They wanted to clean me. I don't remember that. I was sleeping. When I woke up, I understood that my husband was not there. So I said, we need to get to the starosta. We need to get there. That was 7 kilometers from my mother's place. We need to go there and to ask my starosta to search for my husband, where he was. I was asking them where my husband was. They were laughing at me, mocking me, and never answered. And when we heard that they blew up the bridge to Ivankova in the evening, we went to the head of the village council, and she, together with us, on the 2nd of April, with the relatives, crossed this ruined bridge to Ivankiv, and on our way to the state administration, we could see the vehicle, and my husband was getting out of that vehicle. He had different clothes in comparison with what he had when he was leaving the house. When we saw each other, we cried. Then we came to my mother's place, took lots of pills, medicines. We decided to go back home to see what was there. When we came back home, everything was just totally destroyed in our house. All of the doors were open, all of the things were taken away and stolen. Nothing was there. My husband said, "You need to get to the doctor. They took all of our documents and papers." He said, "I will go to the army. I'll get through all of the military commissions. I'll go to the army. And you need treatment." I went to Kyiv city for the treatment. My husband went to the army, to the armed forces of Ukraine. I was operated. I had surge chemotherapies because of cancer. They really treated me for a long time. And on the 14th of May, 2025, my husband perished. He's died, so I am left all alone. Now I'm getting through the treatment as well. Thank you so much, Valentina, for this story. We really feel you. We knew about your husband and that he used to be the soldier of our armed forces. You did not have enough time to interview him, right? Yes, unfortunately, we did not have time to interview him. At this picture, we can see such so-called military correspondent Alexander Kots. Thanks to this picture of his, we found out that Alexander Krolau was there. We began the search. So this military correspondent published the picture with an inscription that it is his trophy. On the picture, on the mug, we can specifically see the surname and the name, Alexander Krolau. We began to search what this person was, and finally we identified that that was the resident of Ivankiv, ex-military commissar who used to be captured. Thanks to this picture of the military correspondent, we found that out. Natalia, you were in the same midwife house as well. You were detained as well. Could you please tell in a nutshell why you were detained, as you can imagine, because there was some reason why you were detained, and who those people were, who both Valentina and you saw? I'm lieutenant or colonel, and now I'm retired because of my health. During the occupation, I was the head of the department. So I'm the retired lieutenant colonel, and many firemen couldn't come back to the fire station since the first days of the invasion. On the 1st of March, I had the opportunity to get to Ivankiv because I was living 5 kilometers from Ivankiv. I decided to be the head of the firefighters unit, who then were just scattered all over, because there were lots of shellings and bombings, and we didn't have a bomb shelter. There was no place to hide from that. So using my own vehicle, knowing everyone personally, as I used to be the head of Kyiv district sector, so I knew all of the firefighters units which were my subordinates. I knew who was living where, so I collected them all over Kyiv and Sukachi village. I organized shifts on the territory of the unit. We hid all of the property and began the shifts. During the night of the full-scale invasion beginning, we were at home, so we were gathered together. But in the evening of the same day, at about 10 p.m., we could see the first vehicle of Russians for the first time. We started our shifts. I brought them, the guys, to their houses. This was the situation. But the vehicles had to be labeled by the white stripe, which meant that we were civilians. Several days passed, and the civilians came to us, to the rescuers, for the water delivery, because there was no power supply and no centralized water supply. So I was forced to negotiate with the rescuers, with the drivers who took their shifts, whether they would agree to use a big truck, KAMAZ, to bring water to the civilians. But before that, we needed to confirm it and to coordinate it. Because, as I explained to them, taking a great big red truck to the village could pose a threat. It could be shelled. Those people could not be predictable. So, on our territory of Ivankova, we have the fishery, and the head of the fishery distributed fish for the population for free. So, using our vehicle, I took that fish as well, and we brought it to the hospitals, to the ambulance. We also knew that there could be older people there. We brought it to them. Those people couldn't even walk. So we brought the fish to them, as we were told where to. When we were on tour, I met the military of Russian Federation. I came up to them and explained to them in Ukrainian that we need the fire truck to deliver water for the civilian population. They did not understand me, so I translated that into their Russian language. In a couple of minutes, maybe in 15 or 20 minutes, the vehicles came to our fire station. 6 pickup trucks and 2 KAMAZ trucks covered with they were covered with the tarpaulin, and they were very numerous, like ants. Their boss was Vladimir, and he asked what we were doing and why. I explained everything, that people did not have any water supply. There was no water supply in the apartments, and there were no wells on the territory of the houses. I explained it to them. They took me to the vehicles so that I could show them the route. I showed them the 9-storied buildings, and we went there. Then the Russian military accompanied us. Our tank came, the water tank came, and the people were in panic. They thought that the water was poisoned. They knew each other, they were from Ivankiv as well, so this is how we distributed water. We delivered water to them. When we were out of fuel, the bakery already did not have power supply as well, so the civilians couldn't get bread as well. Thanks to the senior operator and the management of the fuel station, they allowed us to pump in some fuel. We brought it for our vehicle, which was delivering water for the civilians, for the bakery, so that they could find the bigger power generator, so that they could bake some bread, and also for the power generator of our hospital. We organized all of that, and we organized the delivery, the supply, during a week. And the Russian soldiers came to the fire station as if they were working there. Every time they wanted us to get to their place, to be on their side. We were told, we should know that you are the firefighters, so you should have the uniform. Of course, we had Ukrainian flags on our sleeves, and no one took down the Ukrainian flags. They came up to us and said, "This flag is not relevant." I answered, "Maybe it's not relevant for you, but it's relevant for me." They never answered. They did not fight back. They allowed us to go on with our work, and on the 18th of March, the bread factory baked bread thanks to us and thanks to the fuel supply for the civilians. We delivered this bread and water to the civilians of Kyiv, brought fish, even if we could. It's not what I did only, but all of the firefighters of the 41st station who were working then. So you were detained. When were you detained? Together with Valentina? No. On the 18th of March, a civilian came, he took my documents and he said, "As you don't want to cooperate, we shouldn't see you here anymore." They even threatened to shoot me, so I never came there after the 18th of March. But on the 23rd of March, they came to my home, to Sukachi village. So even the witnesses were rushing to me to warn me, but they didn't have enough time to warn me. I came to my brother's place with my car. I brought some milk for him, and there were 13 people in the house, among whom 6 were children. Natalia, could I ask you, what was the objective? As far as I understand, the situation was almost similar to Valentina's. You were taken to the midwifery station. No, they brought me there and they said that they threw me into the basement where Alexander Krylau, Valentina's husband, was sitting, in the cellar. What was their objective? I don't know. They interrogated where the prosecutor's office is, where the head of the village is, where police is, why I did not want to cooperate, where my brother was. My brother is dead now because they shot him. He was a retired anti-terroristic operation soldier. I don't know their objective. I still don't understand what was their objective to detain me. We were sitting in the basement, and later I identified it, and on the 23rd, first Alexander was taken for interrogation, then I was taken there. I was blindfolded as well, but not with a duct tape, but with some rug, and there was a jacket on me. It was really smelly. After the interrogation, first they wanted to influence me morally, that they can release me alive, but my relatives will be shot. They really wanted to influence me and to conduct pressure. They knew that my children were abroad, and really at that moment my daughter with her family were abroad. They even knew that they were in Egypt. They knew that. They knew everything about every single nephew and niece, about me. They knew everything. So they asked about the prosecutor's office, but they still knew where your daughter was, in Egypt. Yes, they even knew the city in Egypt. But it's interesting about the research, because really, what you are telling now, all of those interrogations which took place, are different from Dymr, where people were just taken to the basement and the interrogations were not that numerous. What does it witness about? I think that it tells that the management level, which was staying in Shybene district, was higher than in Dymr. And as far as I understand, what they wanted to get to know. What was the objective of those interrogations? I don't know about their objectives. They wanted to know where my brother was, and I answered that my brother left even before the beginning of the full-scale invasion for some holiday. As for the children, I don't know. We were interrogated even on the 22nd. There was the fire in the fire station. However, when my documents were taken, all of the firefighters fled, and our management said to scatter, to run away and never come back to the fire station. So we don't know who created this arson of the fire station. So how did they release you? On the 25th, I was released because they took me somewhere. Well, can I skip the story about 2 nights? I don't want to delve deeper into details. On the 25th, they went to Pribirsk, and they said that I was just lucky. I was lucky. Just run, bitch, run. Then they threw me away. Just along the road. I do apologize. I don't want to remember about that. Yes, thank you. We do apologize that we make you remind about all of that again. We would like those people to be punished, the ones who detained you and who gave the order to detain you. Lydia, I have a short question to you. When we are speaking about Shybene village, about the pits in the local forest, who those people were who were there in Shybene village? What was the level of the management of the army of Russian Federation? Who stayed there? We may say that this was the top management. In fact, who exactly, we don't know for sure, except several people. For instance, Davor Savicic. He was identified by several witnesses. They identified him by pictures, this Serbian guy. And several witnesses used to say that they were kept in the pits by the people who were Serbian. So, you mean that in the Russian army, which attacked Kyiv, included groups which were subordinate to the main intelligence department of Russian Federation. In particular, these groups included people who were within, for instance, the so-called Wagner company and Redut formation, right? In particular, there were foreign citizens, like the citizen of Serbia. Yes, we can now see the whole link of events. Those were the Russian soldiers of the regular units and the so-called private companies Redut, which comprised of Wagner fighters, wolves, Vovky. Those are the mercenaries from the foreign countries, the Serbians. And also those were the representatives of the so-called DPR-LPR, because, for instance, the videos which were published showed the representatives of Luhansk region. But the main thing that we can see that all of those groups, whatever their name are, private companies or any others, they were still subordinate to the commanders of the regular Russian units of the armed forces of Russia. They were not autonomous units or separate groups. And if, Lydia, you allow me, I would give the floor to Anna, who can tell us what that means from the perspective of the international law. Thank you. We don't have that much time left, so I'll try to be as brief as possible in points. First of all, this research of Shybene settlement really is unique to some extent, because one settlement is really looked into in all of the details during all of the period of occupation in many aspects, so please get acquainted with that. But altogether, Shybene village is not unique. Such villages are really numerous during occupation of Kyiv region. Such villages are still numerous, the ones which are still under occupation. And the story However, it is huge with lots of people involved and many victims. Still, this story is just a little piece of the bigger puzzle, of the bigger picture. As I'm the head of the Department of War and Justice, I'd like to delve deeper into how these crimes are being investigated, the crimes depicted in our report, what the investigative authorities and prosecutors' office do to take those who are to blame for that to liability. First of all, a very important aspect which was already mentioned by Lydia, and I think we can say openly about that because it's a fact. The person of this Savicic, the soldier of the private military company Wagner, was identified by us. We, the documenters and OSINTers of Media Initiative for Human Rights, found the witnesses in those pits, interviewing them and providing them different pictures for identification. This is how we identified that the person who stayed in those pits, who personally tortured and killed those people, was Davor Savicic, the soldier from the private military company Wagner. And if the Media Initiative didn't give this data to the law enforcement authorities, this notice of suspicion would never be given, and this case wouldn't be in the court now. Moreover, the victims in the pits, the ones who survived, were never interviewed by the law enforcement authorities after the occupation. So neither National Police nor SSU nor any other structures interviewed them. The information about these pits could be lost forever, both for the justice and for the memory about this war, for memorialization. This is a tiny but really demonstrative point that, unfortunately, as of today, the vast majority of the information about such crimes is still beyond the attention of the law enforcement authorities. Partially, it can be explained by the fact that these crimes are more numerous than all of the investigators of Ukraine can investigate, but also it can be partially explained how the work of the investigative authorities is organized and what's the focus of the investigators is. Because unfortunately we see that as of today, the investigative authorities have the top priority of the performers, those who are directly the perpetrators, the people who can be identified by the victims. But still, mostly, the whole colossal system of the organization of such crimes is beyond the attention. Each of the crimes which were mentioned today was not committed because the perpetrators wanted to, not because it occurred to some soldier to kill or to torture, but because all of those people are the part of the huge coercion machine of killings and terror. And this is how these crimes should be investigated, as the whole system. But unfortunately, we don't have it. For instance, one of the identified perpetrators and organizers of this system of occupation in Shybene village is Andriy Karkin. He is the suspect in 2 criminal cases, and in both cases he is a suspect of separate tiny cases. Like in one case, he took the civilians out of their home, he threatened them with death, and in another case, Mr. Karkin in Bucha town tortured a civilian. So these cases will be considered like this in the court, and the judgment will say that this person committed this. He harmed certain civilians, and the verdict will never reflect his real role as the military, the soldier of the high rank in the commandment, and his role which he played in the organization of the terror system. Unfortunately, this practice is going on, and when we get the verdicts, the rulings in several years or dozens of years, I mean the war crimes verdicts committed by Russians, unfortunately, this systemic character of terror organized by Russian Federation will not reflect the whole picture. Unfortunately, this is the current situation. Thank you, Anna, so much. We really have just 1 minute left, maybe a couple of minutes. If there are any questions from the audience, we'll try to answer as quickly as possible. While you are thinking, let me again say that this investigation is of the occupation of one village, which is and used to be important to show the system, how occupation took place, how the detainment of civilians took place, and what took place with the civilians, which were taken by Russian occupational troops and who tried to take the civilians without taking them to the territory of Russian Federation. We wanted to understand why, because if you don't know, I will tell you about 250 citizens of Ukraine from Kyiv region, civilians, I mean, are still on the territory of Russian Federation. They are detained incommunicado in different detainment centers on the territory of Russian Federation. And what's important, now we have, together with the law enforcement authorities, we can find a very important, influential commanders of Russian armed forces. I can see there are no questions left. Okay, then. Thank you again, everyone who came today. I would like to thank our witnesses. I really apologize that you had to remember about all of that again and tell us about that. I really hope that the law enforcement authorities interviewed you in more details, and all of that is in the materials of the criminal cases, and the notice of suspicion to the citizen of Serbia is only one of the possible notices of suspicion. So I would like to thank my colleagues who were working on this research, the ones who are here today and the ones who unfortunately couldn't join us today, that is Lydia Tarash and Anastasia Panteleeva, who believed that, and they went along the streets of the villages and showed the pictures of the Russian suspects to identify them, and finally they found the surnames of the people involved in that. Thank you. If there are any questions left, you can come up to our guests, our experts and victims, and communicate with them directly.